to the adventure in Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman, W4CY Radio, and this is another edition of our segment, Positively Pipeman. And we have our returning expert guest because, man, he's such an important guest. He helps your business and like no other person on the planet. And in these segments, every week, he's going to come on as part of this Monday show for Positively Pipeman and give us strategies that can make our dreams in business come true. So let's welcome back Michael Barbarita. How are you?
Fantastic, Dean. How are you doing? Thanks for the kind words.
Oh, my pleasure. Because it's true. Like, I don't even need a script because I listen to you on your own show on our network, and I've talked to you at length, and, I just know you're the right answer to most of our businesses out there, especially in these trying times that we're experiencing right now.
That's for sure. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So what I'd like to know is, we always talk about the 80-20 rule. So how does that really apply to business according to Michael Barbarita and NextStepCFO?
Yeah, great question, by the way. As we were doing research for our book, and as I interview business owners for the book, it was very common that from a business standpoint, people felt that the 80-20 rule, and by the way, no one's ever wrong about the 80-20 rule, so I don't want to make it sound that way, but most people think at 80-20, and they're right, that 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their customers, and that's absolutely correct. But what we discovered when we were doing research for our book is that 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of what you do every day. And that business owners aren't focused on the key components of that 20% that drives 80% of the revenue. And what we did when we were doing research for our book is we identified 7 areas that we call the 7-step pathway to profit formula. And we identified 7 areas which represent the 20% that drive 80% of the revenue. And, most business owners want to know what that 20% is. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through that. And a lot of business owners that I've interviewed really never understood what that 20% was. And so we're going to go through it today. The first step in the 7-step pathway to profit formula. And by the way, I want to mention one other thing. When we were doing research for our book, we found that there were 8 areas of impact where the business owners had to know about. And then when we dug deeper and deeper, there were more layers and more layers and more layers, and we ended up at 32. And with this, and there's under those 32 categories, there was another 20 or 30 categories. And so business owners are overwhelmed. And that's what led us to understanding what that 20% was that drives 80% of the revenue, because business owners are just completely overwhelmed. And what they do, Dean, is they hire marketing companies. And the first thing that marketing companies do is they omit all the stuff that's needed for a business owner to get grounded. All those areas that I talked about, they skipped over those completely and went right to Facebook ads or social media ads. And that's starting in the weeds. And so what we did is we identified those 7 steps that drive 80% of the revenue. And the first one is leads, but not just any lead, good quality leads for your ideal customer. That's really critical. And, all of this first part that I'm going to be talking about is really just about messaging. That's all it's really about. The second is conversions. And let me define conversions. Conversions is taking a prospect, whether it's cold or warm, into your sales process, whatever that is. For a retailer, the sales process is them showing up in the retail store. For somebody like myself, sales process is a meeting. So it could be a meeting, it could be a proposal, it could be an estimate, whatever your sales process is. So the first step is quality leads. The second step is conversions.
I want to talk about those leads for a second too, because as somebody that's been a salesperson since I'm like 11 years old, okay, I've gone through every kind of lead there is. And here's what I found that just proves the point of what you're saying is, okay, so when I was in the investment business, when I started in the investment business, the leads they were giving us were basically as cold could get. They, it was just basically buy a book of names and phone numbers, and that was your leads.
Right.
Then later in the business, I would do exactly what we're doing now, and I would have a radio show to get leads for my investment business. And, there was such a huge difference because when I was first in the business, you had to make like 500 calls a day. This was the numbers. 500 calls a day to get 20 people to actually talk to you. And out of that 20, 5 to 7 maybe want some information, and you would mail them out information, back in the snail days. And and then out of that, 1 of 10 would actually become your client. So you'd have to make 500 dials to get a client, which is a lot. Okay. And it's a lot of work, and it's time consuming. It's not fun, but then I could get on like a radio show like this. As one example, I don't mean somebody else's, but I mean I had my own radio show, and then that was a different time too, when like infomercial type of stuff worked, really well. And then I would get these leads that 90% of them would send me money, and so you would think, because I only had a handful of leads, it's like, oh, I'm not going to get any business. But that handful of leads got me way more business than the 500 dials that, to get one lead, So I wanted to stress that point, because your strategies for people are so that they can gain more, revenue with less effort and time.
That's correct. That's right. And the messaging is the key. Your messaging in a cold call is completely different than the messaging that you have in your show.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So, and that's something business owners need to understand more. It's not necessary. It isn't Facebook versus Instagram versus LinkedIn versus. It's not that. It's the message.
Yeah.
If you get the message right. Now, granted, you could go to the wrong platform in terms of demographics. I get that, But the bottom line is, lots of times when business owners talk shop, have you tried Facebook? How does it work for you? It's totally irrelevant. It's about the messaging, whatever the messaging that particular business had.
I think that's so true too, by the way, because listen, you could still say to anybody in our age group, something like plop, plop, fizz, fizz, and they will automatically think of Alka-Seltzer. Okay. You could say, how do you spell relief? And I don't even think you can buy Rolaids nowadays, but you still remember the message.
That's right. Absolutely. No question. That's the key. That is absolutely the key. So in continuing on with the 7 steps, so the first step is leads, as I said, high quality leads. Second is conversions. The third step is closing rate. And by the way, a business owner needs to track their data. They need to track the information, because that's how they learn where they need to tweak. If you have a closing rate of 1%, if you could get quality leads and you could convert them into your sales process, but your sales process yields a closing rate of 1%, where you have to work. What you have to work on. But you have to know that data. Otherwise, you're going to be flying blind, and you're really not going to tweak in the right areas.
And ignorance is not bliss in this instance.
Very true. And so you have higher quality leads. you're converting more of them into your sales process, and then you're increasing your closing rates. Now, the fourth step is retaining clients. This is where a lot of businesses fall down, Dean. They don't focus at all on client retention. And here we are. We're putting it in there as one of the, is that part of that 20% that business owners need to focus on that drive 80% of your revenue, because you need to retain clients and customers. It's a critical component, and it takes some work. It's not one of these. A lot of business owners think that once they have a customer, they get to keep them by default.
No.
That doesn't happen.
No. And nowadays they think it even more. Like, we think because we live in this world of AI and everything's automated that, no. That's why, I run this network, on a new technology, but old school philosophy, customer service. You have to be on the same team with your customer so that you can get them the success they need, so you can get the success you need.
Excellent. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so true. And then, so you have high quality leads, you're converting them more into your sales process, you're closing them at a higher rate, you're retaining those customers. Now you have to focus on the average dollar per sale. So there are strategies associated with increasing the average dollar per sale for your existing customers. And now, obviously, also any new customers as well. But once a customer comes into your ecosystem, you're able to increase that average value. It's just part of that 7-step formula that's going to drive 80% of the revenue. And then the 6th step is frequency of sale. So now, if you have 500 customers and you're selling to them 2.3 times a year, you want to look to sell to them 3 times a year. Maybe you have to add more value to your products or services. Maybe you have to add more products or services, but you want to increase the number of times that you sell to them.
I love that concept right there, because that's something I live by as well. I think you have to constantly innovate and evolve your business so that you can do that. There's always something else that could add value and benefits. That would be something that your customer would want to take advantage of.
I agree, 100%. I've seen many times where business owners fail to rejuvenate even former customers. They fail to rejuvenate them. All of your customers are on what we call the buyer's journey, and that journey could take anywhere from 15 minutes to 15 years, but they're on that journey, and you have to constantly nurture your customers and your existing base to sell to them more frequently.
And, I tell people throughout my whole career that have worked for me, basically you do have to continue to nurture those people, because if you're not, and you think, okay, I got them in the bag, even in the investment business, everybody says my broker, until somebody else comes along and does nurture them. And then you can't save them after that, because you should have nurtured them before somebody else did.
Right. Well, that's right. Because as Mark Cuban says, there's always somebody out there going after your butt, and trying to take you down.
Totally.
And so, right. And they'll grab those customers just as easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final step is we work on costs, both fixed costs and variable costs. And there's a number of ways to cut costs. Business owners normally find it difficult to cut costs, but there's a lot of different ways that we use to cut costs. And but it's still it's one of the 7 steps. So just in review, it's leads, conversions, closing rates, client retention, average dollar per sale, frequency of sale, and finally costs.
And I think they need to know a lot more. So how do people reach out to you to discuss this more, where you can expand on this more and give them specific strategies customized for their business and their goals?
what I'd love to do, Dean, is I'd love to interview him for the next edition of my book, because there I go through strategies that we that we help business owners implement, not just learn, but implement, and then get a really good understanding. And by the way, they can help me with the next edition of my book, because what we do is we interview business owners because business is always changing. And we always want to make sure that our strategies are up to date and that they work. Now, they've worked in every economic environment so far, so I don't think that they're not going to work in any future one. But we need more industry information to prove what we already know. And so, and then we update the book. So the way that works is it's 60 minutes on Zoom. I present strategies for my book, and then I ask you if the impact the strategy would have if a business owner would implement it in your industry. It's more of an industry perspective that I want to get, and then I document it for the book, and that's it. And I would love to interview business owners. They could go to NextStepCFO.net. That's NextStepCFO.net/contact. That would get them into my contact page, and then they simply fill out the contact form, and in the message section, write the words "book interview," and I'll send you a calendar link.
Nice. And then also, if you could tell everybody how they could check out your book, your podcast, your live show, all that.
Excellent. Yes. But you can get a copy of the book. It's free. By the way, it's my contribution to the business world. Go to NextStepCFO.net. Right on the homepage, you can download the book. That's number one. Number two, as Dean said, you could visit our podcasts at powerfulbusinessstrategies.com and our radio show called Powerful Business Strategies on Mondays at noon Eastern time.
Right here on
W4CY.com.
Yep, right here, same place. In
Yeah,
fact, if you have a time travel machine, after you hear this episode, go back an hour before the episode, and you'll be able to catch his show. Otherwise, wait till next Monday.
There you go.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Michael. Once again, you have some amazing, very specific strategies for people, which is what I love, because there's so many coaches out there that just give such generic advice. And, every business is different. And that's why even the interview, it's great that you're finding out what is most beneficial in different industries, because it's not a one size fits all. But Michael Barbarita, you probably are one size fits all.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.